Hollywood hasn't felt this uneasy in years. Not since the kind of stories surfaced that people whisper about but never say out loud. Because what just came from inside the Reiner family wasn't gossip, wasn't rumor, and wasn't a careless quote taken out of context. It was a warning. A chilling, deliberate warning, delivered by Rob Reiner's own eldest son, Jake Reiner, and it instantly changed how people are looking at one of the most beloved families in entertainment history. For decades, the Reiner name has stood for warmth, humor, and stability. A legacy built on laughter, trust, and the idea that some families really do have it all figured out. But behind closed doors, something was unraveling. And according to Jake, it had been unraveling for a long time. When Jake finally broke his silence, he didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He didn't dramatize. He simply said a sentence that landed like a punch to the chest. I warned them, that was it. And suddenly the internet froze, because warnings mean fear, fear means patterns, and patterns mean this wasn't sudden, it was ignored. Within minutes, social media exploded, old clips resurfaced, comment sections spiraled. Insiders began leaking fragments of private conversations that painted a far darker picture than anyone expected. Some people begged Jake to stop talking. Others said he was the only one brave enough to say what needed to be said. And now the question everyone is asking, the one no one seems ready to answer, is this. What exactly did Jake Reiner see that no one else wanted to believe? From the outside, the Reiner family looked like the definition of Hollywood stability. Decades in the industry, no constant scandals, no public meltdowns, no tabloid chaos. Rob Reiner was the filmmaker everyone trusted, the dad. The steady one, the man whose work made people laugh, cry, and believe in happy endings. And his children? They were supposed to be proof that fame didn't have to destroy a family. But according to people close to the situation, that image was never the full story. Jake Reiner, the eldest, grew up learning how to read a room before he learned how to speak his mind. Insiders say he was the child who watched more than he talked, who sensed tension before it was acknowledged, who adjusted himself to keep everyone else calm. While the world saw a loving household filled with creativity and warmth, Jake allegedly saw something more fragile underneath, a family constantly trying to hold itself together without admitting how close it was to cracking. Sources claim that from a young age, Jake felt responsible in a way that was never explicitly assigned, but quietly expected. He was the one who smoothed things over, the one who stepped back, the one who didn't demand attention. And over time, that role taught him something dangerous, that staying quiet was the same thing as keeping peace. But peace, insiders say, was an illusion. Behind closed doors, the family dynamic was reportedly shaped by fear disguised as compassion. Jake's parents loved deeply, but that love sometimes crossed into overprotection. Problems weren't confronted head-on. They were softened, explained away, delayed. According to Jake, there were moments when he felt something was wrong, not dramatic, not explosive, just off. Small warning signs that didn't feel safe to ignore. People close to Jake say he began voicing concerns privately years ago, not publicly, not emotionally. Calm conversations, carefully chosen words. He didn't accuse anyone. He didn't demand ultimatums. He simply said he was worried. He said he felt uneasy. He said he was afraid of what might happen if boundaries weren't set. And each time, those concerns were met with reassurance. He's fine. It's just a phase. We're handling it. Those phrases, Jake would later suggest, became the family's shield, a way to push discomfort aside without ever truly addressing it. And Jake, trained by years of being the reasonable one, backed down. Not because he agreed, but because he didn't want to fracture what little stability they had left. Insiders describe a house where silence grew heavier over time, where conversations stopped mid-sentence, where plans changed suddenly without explanation, where Jake began feeling like a guest in his own family, always careful not to say the wrong thing, always aware that one honest sentence could set off something no one was ready to deal with. Friends noticed the change in him. They say Jake became more guarded, more distant. He worked more, traveled more, stayed busy, not chasing fame but avoiding home. When asked why, he'd deflect. Just work, life's busy. But privately, he admitted he didn't feel safe emotionally inside his own family anymore. And that's when the fear intensified. According to Jake, there came a moment, a specific stretch of time, when his gut told him something irreversible could happen. Not a vague anxiety, a real physical fear. Insiders say Jake made calls, sent messages, asked for meetings. He pleaded with his parents to slow down, to take things seriously, to put safeguards in place. He wasn't trying to control anything, he was trying to protect them. "I'm scared," he allegedly told them. "Please be careful. This doesn't feel okay." But hope was stronger than fear in that house. Rob and Michelle, by all accounts, believed deeply in unconditional love. They believed patience could heal wounds. They believed family meant never giving up, even when things were hard. And to them, Jake's fear sounded like pessimism, like giving up too soon, like abandoning someone who needed support the most. That difference in perspective quietly widened the gap between them. Jake reportedly felt dismissed, not ignored, but gently overridden. His concerns acknowledged, then set aside. And because he loved his parents, because he didn't want to be seen as dramatic or alarmist, he stepped back again. But this time, the silence hurt more. According to insiders, the last conversation Jake had with his parents before everything collapsed was tense but calm. No shouting, no fight, just a final attempt to be heard. He reiterated his fear. He asked them to reconsider certain decisions. And once again, they reassured him, told him they had things under control, told him everything would be okay. That reassurance would haunt him. When the tragedy finally broke, Jake didn't scream. He didn't collapse. He froze. People close to him say the shock was so intense that his body simply shut down. And once the details became clear, once the full weight of what had happened set in, the grief was immediately joined by something even harder to live with. Regret. Not because he hadn't loved enough, but because he had spoken and been ignored. When Jake later said, "I warned them," it wasn't an accusation. It was a confession soaked in pain. A man admitting that he saw the edge of the cliff before the fall and couldn't stop it. That single sentence detonated across the internet. People began dissecting everything. Old interviews, old photos, family appearances that once seemed warm now felt tense in hindsight. Comment sections filled with theories. Some blamed Jake for speaking at all. Others blamed the parents for not listening. Others asked the question no one wanted to ask. How many families are living this same story right now, convincing themselves love is enough? Hollywood insiders began leaking pieces of private context. Nothing definitive, nothing confirmed, but enough to suggest Jake's warning wasn't impulsive. It was years in the making. And as sympathy poured in for Jake, another reality began to surface. This story wasn't just about loss. It was about what happens when fear is dismissed because it's inconvenient, when love becomes a blindfold, when the person who sees the danger earliest is labeled negative instead of listened to. By the end of that week, Jake Reiner wasn't just grieving his parents. He was carrying the unbearable weight of knowing he tried to stop it and failed. And just when people thought the story couldn't get more painful, a new detail surfaced. A phone call, a request, and a decision Jake made that would permanently fracture what little was left of his family. The phone call came when Jake least expected it, and according to insiders, it changed the tone of everything that followed. Up until that moment, the public story had been about grief, shock, and a son trying to make sense of a loss no one should ever have to carry. But behind the scenes, something else was unfolding. Something far messier, far more personal, and far more divisive than anyone watching from the outside could have imagined. Sources close to Jake say the call came late at night, long after the news had broken, long after condolences started flooding in, long after the world had already decided how it felt. The screen lit up with a name Jake hadn't been ready to see. He stared at it for a long time before answering, his chest tight, his hands shaking, because he already knew what the call would be about. The voice on the other end wasn't calm. It wasn't composed, it was desperate. Insiders claim the request came quickly without much build-up. Help, support, loyalty. Jake was allegedly asked to step in emotionally, publicly, and possibly financially to help fix the situation, to soften narratives, to help manage perception, to stand beside family when it mattered most. And that's where everything cracked wide open. Jake didn't respond immediately. People say he went quiet, listening, absorbing, reliving every warning he had ever voiced and every moment he had been brushed aside. This wasn't just about what had happened. It was about what had been ignored. And now, suddenly, he was being asked to help clean up the aftermath of something he had tried to prevent. According to insiders, Jake said no, not angrily, not cruelly, just firmly. That refusal, sources say, sent shockwaves through the family. Because for the first time, Jake wasn't being the one who adjusted. He wasn't stepping back. He wasn't absorbing the discomfort so everyone else could stay afloat. He drew a line, and it stunned everyone involved. Jake reportedly told them he couldn't use love as a shield anymore. He couldn't pretend nothing was wrong. He He couldn't save anyone by sacrificing himself. And most importantly, he couldn't stay silent just to make things easier for others. That decision, insiders say, fractured what little unity remained. Almost immediately, the narrative began to shift. People close to the family started talking. Quietly at first, then louder. Whispers about tension turned into leaks. Messages allegedly exchanged behind the scenes began circulating, vague screenshots, blurred timestamps, half-sentences that hinted at emotional pressure and conflicting expectations. None of it was confirmed, but none of it was denied either. And that's when social media exploded. Clips of Jake's interview went viral overnight. His words were slowed down, replayed, analyzed frame by frame. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. Some accused him of abandoning family when they needed him most. Others praised him for finally choosing truth over loyalty at any cost. Why didn't they listen to him? Why is he being blamed for speaking up? This is what happens when families protect dysfunction. The divide was brutal. Celebrities began reacting without naming names, long posts about boundaries, cryptic captions about love without accountability, unfollows that didn't go unnoticed. A well-known filmmaker posted a single line that set the internet on fire. Silence doesn't make you kind. It makes you complicit. The post was deleted within an hour, but the damage was done. Insiders claim Jake was urged again to clarify his statement, to soften it, to say he misspoke, to emphasize unity, but Jake refused. He didn't escalate, he didn't add accusations. He simply stood by what he said. I warned them. That sentence became a lightning rod. As days passed, Jake's grief began to show in ways that couldn't be edited or spun. Friends say he barely slept, that he replayed conversations in his head over and over again. That guilt crept in during the quiet moments, whispering questions no one could answer. Should I have yelled instead of whispered? Should I have come home sooner? Should I have forced them to listen? Those questions haunted him. According to people close to Jake, he broke down privately more than once. Not on camera, not for sympathy. In empty rooms, sitting on the floor, holding his head in his hands. The weight of being right too early is heavier than being wrong too late. And then came another twist no one expected. A new insider began speaking anonymously to media outlets, claiming the family had a long history of choosing hope over hard decisions. That Jake wasn't the first to raise concerns, just the first to say them publicly. The source claimed there were years of quiet accommodations, excuses, and emotional negotiations that allowed instability to continue unchecked. Again, nothing confirmed, but the picture forming was unsettling. People began asking dangerous questions, not about blame, but about patterns, about how often families mistake endurance for strength, about how many warning signs get dismissed because acknowledging them feels like giving up. Jake, meanwhile, stayed quiet. He didn't post cryptic messages. He didn't defend himself online. He didn't attack anyone. That silence spoke louder than any rant ever could. Friends say he was done performing grief for public consumption. He had said what he needed to say. The rest was out of his hands, but the pressure didn't stop. Commentators dissected his body language, his tone, his pauses. Some said he looked angry. Others said he looked broken. A few said he looked relieved, and that accusation hurt the most. Insiders say Jake was devastated by that narrative. Relief was the last thing he felt. What he felt was loss layered on loss. Then, quietly, another alleged private conversation surfaced. This one described as a heated exchange where Jake was told he was tearing the family apart. According to the source, Jake responded with a sentence that left the room silent. I didn't tear it apart, I tried to hold it together. That line spread fast. By then, the public had fully split into camps. Some demanded Jake apologize. Others demanded the family acknowledge what he was saying. Still others begged everyone involved to stop talking altogether. But the damage was already done. Jake's warning had become more than a personal truth. It had turned into a mirror people didn't want to look into. Because admitting he was right meant admitting that love, unchecked, can sometimes be dangerous. That ignoring fear doesn't make it disappear. And that silence doesn't always mean peace. As the story continued unfolding, one thing became painfully clear. Jake Reiner wasn't trying to control the narrative. He was trying to survive it. And just when the noise reached its peak, just when it seemed like nothing else could come out of this already shattered family, a final revelation surfaced, one that suggested Jake's warning wasn't just about the past. It was about something that could still happen next. By the time the third wave of reactions hit, the story had stopped feeling like a tragedy unfolding and started feeling like a reckoning, no one had prepared for. Because what began as Jake Reiner speaking from grief quietly transformed into something far more unsettling. The realization that his warning wasn't just about what had already happened. It was about what families like theirs still refused to face. According to people close to Jake, the shift happened during a private meeting that was never meant to leave the room. A meeting meant to calm things down, to talk strategy, to discuss next steps. Instead, it became the moment Jake realized there was no going back. Sources say Jake was asked, again, to reframe his words, to speak more gently, to help protect the legacy, to remember what the Reiner name meant to people. That was when something inside him snapped, not in anger, but in exhaustion. He reportedly said, "The legacy doesn't need protecting. The truth does." That line alone leaked within hours. And when it did, it detonated everything. Hollywood insiders began quietly backing away. Invitations disappeared. Meetings were postponed. The polite distance people create when they don't know what side of history they're standing on settled in fast. Jake noticed it immediately. Friends say he wasn't surprised, just disappointed. He had spent his entire life watching people choose comfort over confrontation, and now he was watching it happen again in real time. Then came the messages, private messages, voice notes, emails that were never supposed to be seen by anyone outside the family. Screenshots began circulating in group chats, then blogs, then comment sections. They were vague but damning in tone. Pleas for silence, requests to handle this internally. Subtle reminders of what speaking up could cost him. Jake never denied they existed. That silence spoke volumes. Fans reacted in ways no one expected. Older women, mothers, sisters, daughters flooded comment sections with stories of their own. About the son no one listened to. The warning signs brushed off. The tragedy everyone said was unforeseeable, even though it had been named out loud years earlier. "This isn't about blame," one viral comment read. "This is about listening when someone is scared." That comment alone was shared tens of thousands of times. Meanwhile, celebrities began choosing sides without ever saying names. A respected actress posted, "Boundaries aren't betrayal." A former child star wrote, "Being the oldest means you're expected to carry everyone else's silence." Even a well-known director reposted Jake's interview clip with the caption, "This is what courage looks like when it's inconvenient." The reaction was no longer controlled. It was emotional, personal, uncomfortable. And Jake? He stepped back completely. No interviews, no statements, no clarifications. People close to him say he finally understood something that took him decades to accept. Explaining himself wouldn't save anyone. Not his parents, not his brother, not himself. But just when it seemed like the story would slowly fade into mourning and memory, another revelation surfaced, this one quieter but far more chilling. An insider claimed Jake's warning had included something he never said publicly. Not out of fear, but out of responsibility. The source alleged Jake had begged for professional intervention. Boundaries, distance, a safety plan. Not punishment, protection. He wasn't trying to exile anyone, the source claimed. He was trying to slow things down before something irreversible happened. That detail changed the tone overnight. Because suddenly, Jake wasn't just a grieving son. He was someone who had tried to intervene in the only way he knew how and failed. The guilt hit him hardest after that. Friends say Jake struggled with the weight of being right. That there's no comfort in foresight when no one listens. That every quiet moment was filled with what-ifs that had no mercy. What if I had been louder? What if I had gone public sooner? What if love hadn't been used as a reason to ignore fear? Those questions haunted him. In private, Jake reportedly broke down more than once, not over anger, but over the unbearable realization that his parents' kindness had been the very thing that left them vulnerable. That love without limits had consequences no one wanted to admit, and then came the final fracture. Nick reportedly reached out again. This time there was no request for money, no demand for loyalty, just confusion, fear. A voice that sounded lost, not defiant. According to sources, Jake listened, really listened, for the first time since everything collapsed. And when the call ended, Jake did something no one expected. He cried, not for what was said, but for what could never be undone. That moment marked the end of Jake's silence and the beginning of something else entirely. Not a public campaign, not a media tour, but a shift in purpose. Insiders say Jake is now focused on something bigger than the Reiner family. Something rooted in prevention, in listening, in breaking the cycles families protect until it's too late. He hasn't announced anything. He hasn't teased a project. But those close to him say this story isn't finished because it was never meant to end with tragedy alone. It was meant to be a warning. And that warning isn't about one family, it's about all of them. The ones who ignore fear because hope feels kinder. The ones who silence the oldest child because they seem strong. The ones who confuse endurance with love. Jake Reiner didn't speak to destroy anything. He spoke because staying quiet had already destroyed too much. And the most unsettling truth of all, the warning he gave his parents is the same warning he's now giving the world. If you're still here, it's because this story didn't feel like just another headline. It felt personal. It felt uncomfortable. It felt like something you've lived through, witnessed, or feared in your own family. And that's exactly why you cannot look away now. Stories like this don't come wrapped in neat endings. They unfold slowly, painfully, and usually when everyone thinks the danger has already passed. If you scroll away, you miss the next revelation. If you stay silent, you miss the chance to be part of a conversation that so many people, especially women who have carried families on their backs, desperately need to have. This channel doesn't chase quick gossip. It tells the long stories, the ones about love turning into obligation, about silence mistaken for peace, about warnings ignored because they were inconvenient. And if Jake Reiner's truth shook you even a little, then you already know this isn't over. Hit the like button so this story keeps moving and reaches the people who need to hear it. Leave a comment because your voice matters more than you think, whether you agree, disagree, or see yourself somewhere in between. And most importantly, subscribe now, not later. Not when the next clip goes viral and everyone's already talking. Subscribe now because the next chapter will be heavier, deeper, and harder to ignore. This wasn't just a warning from one son, it was a mirror. And what comes next may change how we all look at family forever.